Hey, hey, hey. It is an unstoppable day. And you know, if it's Tuesday, it's got to be the Unstoppable Story Show with Terrence Leftridge. And I'm your host, Terrence, the Unstoppable Coach Leftridge with Unstoppable Coaching. And I want to welcome you to another episode of the Unstoppable Story Show, where we talk to ordinary people with unstoppable stories. So come on in, swipe and share, and shout out where you're watching us from. And if you're watching us live, go ahead and put hashtag live. And if you're watching us in the replay, well, thank you for coming back and watching. Just do hashtag replay. We're so happy to have you here with the Unstoppable Story Show this week, rounding out the month of October. And then, you know, the month of October was notorious for two different causes, and we brought spotlight to both causes this month. Cancer awareness, so we brought awareness and spotlights on that earlier this month, and we're going to close out the month again talking about domestic violence. And we're going to talk about this weekend the cycle of abuse that is surrounding the whole domestic violence epidemic. And you know, domestic violence can touch you in many ways. It can touch you personally. It can touch you through a family contact. It can touch you through friends or colleagues. Each and every one of those ways has a different effect on you, whether you are the victim or whether you are someone who knows the victim. And even as we talked earlier this month in one of our shows with Charles Princeton, even if you are the abuser. So I'd like to say that we have touched the whole ideal of domestic violence from all different circles this month. So I thank you guys for joining us. I thank you guys for coming in. Come on in, swipe and share. Let's make sure that we have a good connection. So, you know, I'm always going to go back to the Facebook page and make sure that you guys are tuning in and watching us from wherever you are. Look forward to seeing you. bit.ly/unstoppable stories. That is the page where you can get all the past shows from the Unstoppable Stories show. We are going now on almost 3 years of doing the Unstoppable Story Show, and that truly is a blessing. But I couldn't do it without you and your phenomenal stories of how you have overcome the different things that you've overcome in your life, and how you are more than willing to share that information with the world, share that information with the masses, so that they can recognize that if you can do it, then hey, they can do it too. And we have another phenomenal guest with us this evening as I go through, just trying to make sure that we've got everything working right here in the background. You know, each and every week on the Unstoppable Story Show, there is something that tries to get in and take the show and go its own way. You know, the devil is always busy. And he's always trying to prove to me that even though I say I'm unstoppable each and every week, he's going to throw something my way to test that theory and to make me prove it for a fact. So hold on just 1 second. I want to make sure that this is going through as I look down at my trusty dusty secondary phone. And yep, I see we are recording. So let's just keep it going and see where it takes us so far. So again, as you continue to come in, we want you to swipe and share, swipe and share. Let us know where you're coming from, and definitely show our guests some love when we bring her up. And I just want to say real quickly before we go into this episode that next month, the month of November, is the month of Thanksgiving. And I'm so thankful for you guys, you who are watching the Unstoppable Story Show each and every week. So we're going to be giving away things to show our gratitude for you or our viewers on the Unstoppable Story Show. And we're going to have some phenomenal guests next month talking about being thankful, talking about gratitude, talking about what they are blessed to have happen in their life in 2018. So we definitely want you to tune in all next month for the Unstoppable Story Show with Terrence Lefteridge, where we talk again to ordinary people with unstoppable stories. So here we go. We are going to introduce you to our phenomenal guest this week on the Unstoppable Story Show. She is a mother. She is a speaker. She is a CEO of a multinational company. And she is an author. She is one of the featured authors in the book that was released this year from the Unstoppable Story Show. You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose. And she has a great story called The Wellspring of Life. And within the Wellspring of Life, she talks about how she went through her own cycle of abuse and how she was able to overcome and come out on the other side. So we are looking so forward to talking to her this evening. So without further ado, let's bring up to our audience. Some of you have seen her before. Some of you are going to be meeting her for the very first time, but introducing to you guys once again, the phenomenal Marie Cosgrove. Mic check, mic check. Marie Cosgrove, are you on the show?
I am on. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Hey, and welcome back to the Unstoppable Story Show. You know, you're not a guest, you are family, girl.
Thank you, Terrence.
Well, thank you again for coming on, and thank you for coming on for such a touchy subject. You know, I'm always cautious of some of the storylines that I bring to the show because I know it can be quite difficult to tell a story from a guest point of view, and it can be quite difficult to hear some of these stories from a listener or viewer's point of view. So I thank you up front for your courageousness and your willingness to share your story once again on the Unstoppable Story Show.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you. And I just hope that sharing my story, I'll be able to add value to anyone who may be experiencing something similar and can't seem to find a way to break through that experience.
Well, so let's do this. Before we jump into the story, for our audience that may be meeting you for the first time, why don't you take a couple of seconds to introduce yourself to the Unstoppable Story Show once again?
Sure. My name is Marie Cosgrove. I am a mother of 5. I raised four children single-handedly as a single mom. Dad lost parental rights. So I was basically forced to raise these kids all by myself. Fortunately, they survived my single parenting and they are successful adults now. And then I have an 8-year-old at home. I am also a business owner. I am an owner of a medical device manufacturing company. We manufacture diagnostic devices to help doctors diagnose certain conditions and such as dizziness and other vascular disorders that patients may experience. So I don't work directly with patients, but I work with the physicians that help the patients using our equipment.
Well, that is definitely a mouthful. And when you say everything that you say, it just makes me automatically think of the word unstoppable. So, as I ask every guest who comes on the Unstoppable Story Show, when you hear the word unstoppable, Marie, what comes to mind for you? And what does that mean for you?
Oh, it can mean so many things, but the first thing is that you don't allow something to stop you in your tracks. And we're talking about the topic about domestic violence, and a lot of times when we experience tragedy or difficulties in life, we sometimes get stuck. And how can I overcome this? And to me, unstoppable is someone that can overcome tragic situations. Doesn't matter what comes by your way or what attacks you or what difficulties you face, you are able to overcome those difficulties. And that's unstoppable.
That's well said. I thank you. And I always break the word unstoppable down into the different circumstances that you talk about. No matter what you are going through, no matter if you're going through what Marie is about to share with us this evening, or if you're going through something, if you can even imagine it's something even worse than that, just constantly think of the word unstoppable. That 3 words in one that says unstop able, which means you have the ability to not be stopped no matter what you're going through. And Marie's going to be a testimony to that this evening, so that if you don't believe it for yourself, then take my belief and take Marie's belief and use that as a foundation for you to build your unstoppable belief system as well. So again, as we are jumping in, we want to say good evening to Jackie. Jackie says hello, and Mary Hale says hello. We have people that are watching in the feed but haven't commented in the chat room. So please, by all means, come on in and share your comments. Show us some love, show us some hearts, and encourage us, because we're about to go into the cycle of abuse. And Marie, you know this cycle all too well from a victim standpoint. And people might find it hard to believe after you gave that list of what you are doing right now, that someone like you, a CEO, a motivational speaker, someone who has traveled the world, could be a victim of abuse. Do you get that a lot when you share your story?
Well, quite honestly, I don't really share it too much or share it often. It's quite personal. And when you mentioned that you were talking about this topic in your show, I decided to take the opportunity to go ahead and share my story. But it's not something that I really share, much with people.
And is it some of the normal reasons, because of your current position, or like you said, it's deeply personal, or here's even the better question: then why now do you feel empowered to share your story?
Well, I'll address the previous questions as well and end with your last question. For one thing is I'm no longer there anymore. That's the past. So I don't live in the past anymore. I live for today and tomorrow. The other reason is usually the opportunity doesn't present itself. But if I am working with someone who, or speaking to someone who has gone through what I've gone through or going through that, I will share my story. But like I said, it's not often because of my day-to-day job and the people that I work with. And then finally, you mentioned about, how, can you rephrase that question again for me, if you don't mind?
So the question is, why now? Why
Oh,
why
why now?
why are you at the point now where you can share this story and want to share this story?
For one thing is I feel that if I had someone that I could hear that they had overcome and gone through what I went through, it would have really benefited me when I was much younger. So I feel now that I'm no longer in that place anymore, like I mentioned earlier, but I feel now that I am, if I could do it and if I could overcome a situation like that, it's possible for anybody. And so that's why I'm open to sharing it now.
I love it. I love it. We're talking with Marie Cosgrove. She is one of the co-authors in the phenomenal book that came out this year called You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose. And she tells a deeply personal story in the book, which is related to what we're talking about tonight as we shed spotlight on domestic violence awareness. And we're talking about the cycle of abuse. In the book, Marie, you talk about in your first chapter called The Wellspring of Life, you talk about your journey of abuse between two marriages as a young adult. So however much you want to share and wherever you want to start, let's talk about how the cycle of abuse began in your life.
Well, for me, it started really young, and I didn't recognize it actually till now when I'm working with personal development and I'm studying a lot to grow myself and improve myself. But what I learned now is a lot of it started in my childhood, but I didn't recognize it back then until maybe about 10 years ago. And statistics show that children that have gone through abuse or difficulties growing up generally end up in a domestic violence situation unless they get the help that they need. And I don't think that I ever did. And the reason that I went through abuse is, I share in the book, which I have with me, You Are Unstoppable. I share in that first chapter about the story about how I came into this world. Basically, I am a victim of, actually, I'm not a victim of my mother. I apologize. My mother was a victim of rape. And out of that rape, I came out of that. So I'm the result of the rape. She ended up pregnant and she gave birth to me. On top of that, she had mental illness because she had been in a car accident and she had brain damage. So because she had brain damage and she had mental illness, she did not have a moral compass. And I lived with her the first few years of my life. When I lived with her, she would bring different men into her home who did inappropriate things. And I really won't go into that here, because I don't think
Yeah.
anybody wants to hear that, but it was pretty tragic. And I never really got the help for that. It's something that really stuck with me for a long time and it affected my self-esteem. So growing up, I had low self-esteem issues. And for me, it was because I was a illegitimate child. I did not know who my dad was. I came from, the result of rape. And then on top of that, the things that happened to me as a child, which were always kept a secret, and I wasn't allowed to share it because I was scared of what would happen. I was always told by my mom, if you tell anybody, I'll never see you again. And I loved her so much. I didn't want that to happen. And so I was torn between, keeping quiet and or talking, and I chose to keep quiet. And I think a lot of children who go through abuse generally do stay quiet because they're afraid of what the consequence might be and the threats that are given to you as a child if you tell this is going to happen to you. And so you just don't say anything out of fear. So for me, I recognize now that it came from a lot of self-esteem issues growing up because I felt unworthy. I felt that shame. And I had this built-in shame inside. And no matter what, there's nothing that could take away that ugly stain that I was carrying with me all along. And I attribute that to my choice of, who I married the first time, because I felt, yeah, I'm not going to find anybody. I'm lucky I have this person. And so, like I said, I didn't recognize it back then. I was 18 when I got married the first time, and I had my first child at 21. My second
And
child.
and,
Uh-huh.
and and Marie, before you go into that part, I just want to
Sure.
really circle back so our audience can understand that for you, the cycle of abuse was actually beginning before you were actually born, because it was almost like generational abuse. Your
Right.
mom was a victim of some type of abuse. And for our audience, I think it's important for everybody to understand that if you don't understand, that there are many different types of abuse. There are at least 5 different types of abuse that are common: verbal, emotional, physical, sexual, and financial. But
Mhm.
people also have to understand that there's such a thing as generational abuse, where the abuse gets carried from generation to generation, and we talked about that with one of our guests earlier this month, Marie. So, when I hear you talk about how your mom endured it, and now you were born, and then you had to see it firsthand as a child, and now you are an adult yourself, and some of those same things were happening to you as you became an adult.
Mhm.
But you weren't able to really, were you able to put it into words? Did you know what the word abuse was when you were growing up before you turned 18?
No, I did not know. I did not understand. And I went through additional abuse as a teenager, but I didn't I didn't know the words that I do now. And I thank you, Donald, for sending that message. I appreciate it. But I didn't really recognize it. And it was when I grew older and I was exposed to other terminology. I was like, wow, I went through that. Wow, I experienced that. That's what that was.
So
And I didn't
just
understand it.
just for a second, since you didn't know the word abuse, what were you thinking? What did you think was happening in your world while you were going through all this as a young girl turning into a young lady?
So I'll go back to when I was a child. When that was happening, I knew it was wrong. I just felt this is not right. This is wrong. And I felt horrible about it. And I used to cry a lot as a kid. And I remember visiting my grandmother, and my grandma's like, "Why are you crying?" And she couldn't settle me down, and she would get upset with me because I'm being a bratty little girl crying. And it was these feelings of sadness, but I couldn't express it. And I think as I grew up, I still carried that sadness with me. And as I've learned about the cycles of abuse, I've recognized that things would trigger. Maybe a certain song would play on the radio and I just start crying. And even in my first marriage, he'd be like, "Why the heck are you crying?" Of course, he used more flowery language than that. And I
Yeah.
didn't really understand why I was crying, but there were certain things that triggered, or certain memories. It could be a song, it could be a smell, something that associated it with that experience of when I was a kid.
And I think I'm thank you for sharing that, because it's often hard to put into words what you're going through, especially at a young age. And we always encourage our children to talk to us and to express their feelings.
Hmm.
But when you're going through something like that you can't even verbalize with a word what it is, it's hard to explain. And I appreciate you being able to say that even though you didn't know what the word abuse was, you knew that what was happening to you was wrong. You
Hmm.
knew that you were feeling sad about your situation at the time, and you were expressing it openly through your crying and your tears. I
Hmm.
think that's going to be helpful for some young girl or some young man or some young adult who's finding it hard to be in that situation right now
Mhm.
and being able to verbalize what it is. If you could say to something to that 12-year-old girl that may be experiencing this right now, and then we'll go into the rest of your story. What would you say to that young girl right now that might be going through that type of situation?
I would say reach out to somebody, a teacher, a counselor, a school counselor. Reach out to someone if it can't be someone in the family. And I understand that sometimes that's difficult. For me, it was very difficult to reach out to someone within the family because I was afraid of the consequences. I thought I'd be in trouble, or, what would happen to my mom because she would, tell me this is going to happen. And I was afraid and I didn't want to lose her either. So I would reach out to someone, reach out to a teacher, a friend, maybe, or, another, another parent, another, one of your friend's parents, reach out to them and talk to them, and they'll get you the help that you need.
I love it. We're talking to Marie Cosgrove. She's a mother, she's an author, she's a CEO, and she is talking to us about her story, of her personal story of going through the cycle of abuse in her life and how she's been able to overcome and become one of the unstoppables today. So thank you again, Marie, for being on the show this evening. So we left off in your story in the cycle of abuse at the age of 18, and now you're getting married for the first time. But you mentioned that you were dealing with some self-esteem issues
Mhm.
then because of
Yes.
the abuse you had already went through. So
Mhm.
how did this carry over into now a relationship with a man?
Well, when he was verbally abusive, I I didn't understand it. It was a different type of abuse, I guess, than what I experienced when I was a kid. So I sort of internalized it, and I sort of felt that maybe what he was saying was true. Certain things like, "You're lucky I married you. Who would want you? You don't even have a father. You came out of rape. You're lucky I married you. Nobody would love you." And things like that. And that, now that I look back, that is so silly, but I must have subconsciously believed those words to be true, which now I know it's not true for anybody, because I know that everybody is created unique and special, and everybody is worthy, and nobody deserves to be talked down to despite your circumstances or where you came from. But that's how the abuse started early on in the relationship, and then it got physical later on. And I would go through the cycle of, "I'm so sorry, please forgive me," that apology, apologies, and the honeymoon period. And of course, you want to believe that, and you want to believe everything's going to be okay. And so then you stay, and then you go through the cycle again of the verbal abuse and then the physical abuse. And then, I repeated that cycle at least 4 times during that marriage. And every time I got back together, we would have I had 3 children with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And studies show that there are such things as cycles of abuse for victims as well as for the abuser himself. And I don't have a physical picture of the cycle of abuse, but you can look on the graphic that we did today for the show, and you can see in the lower third that there is that cycle of abuse circle, that cycle of
Mm-hmm.
abuse wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And for the victim, it mainly starts after the abuse. It starts with the excuses, and then you try to rationalize the why the abuser did what he did. And you talked about maybe it was something you did, and you apologized for it. So, and then there's the second phase called the honeymoon phase, where it seems like the abuse is ended and everything is great. It's back to normal and life is good,
Mm-hmm.
and which leads into that routine phase of now you're just living your life day to day, no problems. But as the cycle continues, you see that there is some tension that's building. They say sometimes that once an abuser, always an abuser, and those triggers start happening and again. And if you don't do anything before those triggers really explode, then you find yourself back into a abusive relationship again.
Mhm.
So did you find yourself as a victim going through all those different cycles on the wheel?
Yes, most of those cycles, I did find myself going through that. And yeah, generally I would, I feel, yeah, I must have done something. What can I do different? What can I change and about myself? And then I realized that, yeah, that the abuser, there's nothing they have to want to change. And it's a very difficult cycle to break because they have to go through treatment and therapy and want to make that change. And a lot of times for me, we would go through the counseling, but it would only last for a little bit. Oh, everything was fine. We don't need to go to counseling anymore. We got it. And then it'd start all over again. So it takes a lot of work. I do believe that the cycle can be stopped because I've seen it. I've seen men who were abusers stop being abusers, but it is a very difficult thing, and it takes a lot of work, and you have to be patient. And I don't believe that someone who is being abused or is going through abusive situations, I don't believe that it's safe to go back with that person until that person has gone through a full treatment. And that could be years. That could be 1 or 2 years of treatment, because you're going to continue that cycle over and over again, like I did. And so especially if you have children, your first job is to protect your children and make sure that your children are safe. And so being in that type of environment is not safe for your children.
And so you had 3 children by your
Yes.
first marriage. What made you get out? What made you get out of the relationship?
It's sad to say. The truth is, I might have still stayed in that relationship if he hadn't found somebody else. He met somebody else and just one day said, I'm moving out. I met somebody else that's prettier, blah, blah, blah. And I remember thinking, wow, what a blessing. Like, yay, I don't have to go through abuse anymore. But it was still, it was like another punch in the stomach,
Yeah, it's still
it felt that way. And I know it's silly because it's like, you're getting abused. That's crazy. You should be happy. I was just sad. I had 3 kids. Well, I was pregnant at the time with my third child. So I was pregnant and I was really depressed, and, your hormones and all of that stuff.
yeah.
But he moved out, and then he tried to come back. But at that point, it was like, no, it was too late. And it was a good thing. And I just kept reminding myself, this is a good thing. I don't have to go through this abuse again. And I recognized it for what it was through the help of counseling, because I was continuing the counseling sessions for myself because I was pregnant. And another thing that helped is, reaching out to someone. And I was not good at that. That's why I encourage people, if you're going through that, reach out to someone. I always kept it inside. And I was at the doctor's office and my gynecologist says, why do you have these bruises? And I fall, I bruise easily. But, there were some bruises that were on my back. And the doctor said, no, you didn't fall. And I'm going to take pictures. And she took pictures, and she's the one that called the police and filed a report. And I was terrified. I was terrified because I thought, oh, I'm going to get killed. I thought,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
You
Yeah.
thought the abuse was going to come back even harder as a result of that, right?
Oh, yes. I was terrified. And at this time, it was one of the times when he tried to come back, and I didn't take him back, and I got a really bad beating. And then I just didn't want to say anything. I wanted it all to go away. And she sent me to a specialist because I had all kinds of injuries. So she sent me to an orthopedic specialist because I had problems with my neck and my back. I had been injured so badly. And through her help, along with my employer at the time, I was a marketing director with a bank. They got me the help that I needed, and we were able to get a protective order. And something that's very difficult to get this time I was living in Texas, I was able to get a permanent protective order for the rest of my life. And so I was able to get that, and that just from that point on, I never looked back.
Love it. That's good. That's great information to know. There are things that victims can do to protect themselves after they get away from the abuser. And I'm
Right.
going to ask you after the show if you just throw some of those comments, some of those tools and tips that you utilize during the time that
Mhm.
may help somebody else that's going to watch the show in the replay. So,
Mhm.
you guys, we are talking to Marie Cosgrove, and she is telling her unstoppable story here on the Unstoppable Story Show with Terrence Lefteridge as we shed spotlight on domestic violence in the month of October. Come on in, swipe and share, and go ahead and tell somebody else you may know that is going through this situation or you feel might be going down that road to watch this show. It's something that may change their lives and it just may save their lives. I want to go back to a comment from Angelina Perez. She says that everyone is unique, everyone is special, and everyone is worthy. Those words are so true. But Marie, is it easy to believe those words when you're in the situation?
It is not easy to believe. Thank you, Angelina, for that comment. I appreciate it. It is not easy to believe those words because other people can tell you that and you still replay those negative words in your head. And that's where mindset comes in, and you have to shut those comments out. So anytime you replay that, that voice in your head, you have to shut it out and turn it off. And I know it's a hard thing to do, but with practice, it can be done. Some of the things that I did was I would list, 10 things that I was grateful for. And there's always something to be grateful for. You can either be stuck in, oh my goodness, like I'm a single mom now. I've got 3 kids, or at the time I had 2 and 1 on the way. My life is over. It's never going to be the same, and continue thinking that way, or think positive. And I started thinking, I'm not going to get abused anymore. I don't have to go through this anymore. Thank God my children and me are safe. And thank God that, I didn't expect to get a permanent restraining order. So that was a huge blessing. But there's always something to be thankful for, regardless of how dark and how bad the situation appears to be. For me, it appeared to be, it was the worst. In fact, I had my gas cut off. I was living at a mobile home at the time, and I had my gas cut off. I had my electricity cut off because he went and he was so angry, and he had everything under his name, that he went to the utility company, shut everything down, and got the deposit back in one day. And here, then the baby was born when this had happened. So I had just gotten home and I had nothing, and I was growing up it was in South Texas. That's where I grew up, and that's where I was at the time. And we had a cold front, which it doesn't get cold down there. And this time of the year, this one year, it was really, really cold in the 30s, which is okay here in Ohio, but down in South Texas, it was extremely cold.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yes. And so to have no heat and no electricity and have a newborn baby, I was devastated. And so that was very tough for me. And I just kept thinking, and I remember it was, that day I had come home from work and I had my son, and here it was the night, and I had to wait till the next day before I could do something about getting everything up. So I just got a bunch of extra blankets to keep us warm. But I was just telling myself, thank God I have this beautiful child with me, and we're safe and we're not hurt. And yeah, we don't have heat, but we have a roof over our head, and just trying to think positive. And, it was tough, but I was able to get past that situation.
Yeah, and fast forward, moving past that situation, you got the permanent restraining order. You got to a place of safety for yourself and your children, and you think now we move on, but but wait, that's not the end of the story. Unfortunately, in your cycle of abuse, is it?
No, it's not. I needed to do a lot of work on myself for sure.
So you continue the counseling, and shortly, less than 2 years later, you find love again,
Hmm.
or so you thought. Tell
Right.
us about that story.
Oh, that I really do not like that story, but I'm going to share it. So
So
there was
we can cliff note it because
sure, sure,
there's a different cycle of abuse that occurred in that one, and so
right.
you don't have to go into detail. And I appreciate your transparency, and I trust me, I empathize with you having to tell the story, and so whatever you feel, however you want to cliff note it, and we'll just get to the second point of the cycle of abuse that you wanted to share with us.
Sure. So the second marriage was a gentleman that was, I wouldn't even say gentleman, but a person that was a lot older than I was, and very, very nice, very charming. I was not really in love with him, but he was charming, super nice. And again, I had low self-esteem, and a lot of people that I was surrounded with at the time told me kids need a dad. You know, he's a good guy, he's a Christian, he's got money, he can take care of you and your kids, and your kids need a dad. And I ended up marrying him. I didn't want to. And he even told me, you know, I know you're not in love with me, but you'll learn to love me. I,
Whoa,
I
whoa, yeah.
yeah. And it was just not good. And at this point, I guess that was easier for me to leave because he was abusive towards my children. And to me, he was more emotionally abusive, and that is abuse, and verbally abusive, not physically, but he was physically abusive to my kids. And when I found out, I left so fast. I never looked back, and he lost parental rights to the one child we had. And then after that, I said, well, you know, I need help. What am I doing that's causing me to, you know, get into these relationships? So I started seeking counseling for myself. And of course, my children needed counseling. So we were in counseling for many, many years. And I started to work on myself to, you know, break that cycle. And I learned a lot about myself as well
So
from that.
let's talk about that. Let's and again, thank you for that part. And again, you guys, as you understand from these stories, it's not just the physical abuse. I mean, the physical abuse gets the attention, it gets the headline on the evening news, but there are so many other forms of abuse that cut just as deep as the physical abuse, especially if you've been abused before. And you had people telling you that, you know, everything looked good, everything smelled good, everything tastes good about this man. And because of the situation that you found yourself in, it was better for you to be with this man than your current situation. And sometimes for an abuser, that's all the end that they need to have
Mhm.
in order to get into a controlling situation. When they know that you, quote unquote, need them more than they need you, then that
Mhm.
gives them the thinking, the thought. It's not true, but it gives them the thought that they have control. And for an abuser, the number one thing, the number one high for them is that sense of control. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So
Yeah.
let's move past. You got out of that relationship and you got more into counseling, and you said you found out some things about yourself and you learned some things to help you overcome. So let's help the people that are watching right now. What things
Sure.
did you learn about yourself that you want to impart to our audience?
Sure. I want to share a resource that's really, really good if you're going through abuse. It's called Codependent No More. It's by Melody Beattie. It's She sold millions and millions of copies. Over 5 million copies have been sold. Again,
I know who.
it's called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, and it's spelled Beattie. Melody Beattie, Codependent No More. Now, the book talks about, yes, perfect. Thank you for putting that up. But the book talks about a lot of, you know, situations with alcoholic and alcohol addiction, but the premise behind it, Codependent No More, is very useful for victims. or even if you're an abuser, but specifically if you're a victim. And that book helped me recognize a lot of things about myself. And many times you'll recognize this when you read this, because I have a friend of mine who she's very successful. She has a company that's in produce, and she imports and exports produce products and other products as well. She has a very large company, I think over 500 employees. She's a CEO, a multi-million dollar business, hugely successful. And she's been in relationship after relationship after relationship. I would say maybe about 7 different abusive relationships, including her current relationship. And she read this book, and it really helped her recognize that, because it's a cycle as victims that we go through. And I learned that, I was following this same cycle myself, because a lot of times we want to help the abuser because we think there's something wrong that's causing them to act that way, and we want to try to help that person, or we want to try to change them or change the situation. And we cannot control other people. We sometimes we want to understand, why did they do what they do? Why are they doing what they're doing? Or why am I not good enough? You may never know the answer. And it really does not matter. You really need to get yourself out of that situation. So that book, I highly recommend it, Codependent No More. Those are some of the things that I learned about myself that I really didn't understand, and I didn't recognize until later on, when I started learning about myself. Oh yeah, I always wanted to fix the situation because I thought that I was capable of changing it, and I was not capable of changing it or changing him, because we can't change other people. We can't control how they think or how they behave or what they do.
Absolutely. And I think a great point that you didn't say, but you inferred by your example, is that it's important for victims to understand that, you know what, no matter how much money you make, no matter how much success you're having in your professional life, no matter how much you think you got it together, that you still can fall victim to the different types of abuse. I applaud your friend for figuring it out, even after going through as many different relationships as she went through. But a lot of us are, we wear this mask, and we have this facade that says, because this part of our life is perfect, that we are insulated from the other parts of life that happen to people on an everyday basis. So I think it's important to know that, stature, money, fame, accolades doesn't protect you from ultimately being a victim of any of the type of abuses that we've been talking about on this show. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely agree 100% with that, because I've known people who are, way up here professionally, but in their personal lives, they're experiencing abuse and they don't know how to get out of it, as well as people who haven't achieved that level. And I'm not saying that once you're, like, say you're CEO of a company, that doesn't mean that you're not at a certain level, because you can be hugely successful right where you are. Being a CEO or a business owner doesn't mean that you're any less successful than a business owner.
Absolutely. Understood. So let's talk. We talked about triggers in the cycle of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
After you got out of this last abusive relationship, did you learn more about your triggers so that you wouldn't go back to those type of relationships?
Yes, I absolutely did. I just stayed away from all relationships until my kids were grown. Um, I pretty much was like, okay, I must have a sign that says, if you're an idiot, come talk to me, or I don't know, because it seemed like I attracted that. So I just was staying away from, any type of relationship.
I
And I did, did a lot of self healing, and invested a lot in my personal growth. Another book that I want to share that really helped me tremendously is called Healing for Damaged Emotions. And that's if you've gone. It doesn't matter how old you are, or how young you are. This book is incredible. Healing for Damaged Emotions. It's an older book but there's been over millions of copies sold by David Seamands. It's Seamands. That book helped me tremendously when I was, when I was younger and learning about the abuse that I had experienced when I was a kid. So
Absolutely.
when I was a young adult, it was very, very helpful. It's a very, very good book.
I'm glad you shared that with us. Those are two great books that definitely, audience, you should go pick up, check out on Google, go to your local library. These books are out there. They've been out there long enough that I'm sure you can pick them up at your local public library.
Mm-hmm.
So as we come down to the end of the show, let's talk about, for Marie, if you could list one thing that really helped you overcome this cycle of abuse, for not only you, but for now your adult children, and now for you, with yet you're in a successful relationship right now.
Mm-hmm.
What would be that one thing that you said allowed you to overcome your past and now be the unstoppable person that you are today?
Well, that's kind of hard to put it for one thing because it's a combination of a lot of things.
Okay.
But one of the things, and I do outline, I do talk about it in the book, is I started to recognize what are the things that I'm good at. Because a lot of times when you've gone through abuse, you just remember, like I said, the negative words and the things that people say to you that are very destructive and they're abusive. So everyone has some skill or something that they're good at. For me, I was successful at work. My professional life, I was very good at that. So I would write down, the things that I'm good at, and I would remind myself of those things. I would also remind myself of where I am now. Okay, I'm no longer in an abusive situation. I'm safe now. That was the past. So when a thought would come up of an abusive situation, either when I was a child or through the domestic violence situation, because those memories will never go away. I wish they would, but they don't. They remain there, especially when they're very powerful. So when that would come up, I would immediately remind myself, that's not where I am. That's the past. I'm not there anymore. And I'm in a much better place. And I would start being grateful of the things that were happening, that were successful at that time and at that moment. And there's always something to be thankful for. And I know it sounds something like so silly, and it's like so easy that can't possibly work, writing down 10 things that you're grateful for, but it's very powerful and it does work. And it does help you change your programming. Because instead of waking up and thinking, oh my goodness, I just went through this and this and this, and I experienced all this, and my whole life's a mess, you start thinking, wow, I'm in a great situation right now. I have a roof over my head, or I have my children, we're safe now, or I'm not in that situation anymore. I can move forward. And you start writing down these things that you're happy for. Your whole outlook in life changes, your attitude changes, and people respond to you different because you are now expressing positivity. So you're going to attract positivity. But when you're thinking negative, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I went through that, you begin to attract negativity. And that is so true about, the energy that we release out into the universe. And now it is scientifically proven. I will give you, my dog is eating, and I hope you can't hear him, but he is munching.
Can't hear him at all.
Oh, you can't? Okay, I can hear it. So anyways, he's pretty loud. But, we have, EKGs, for example. That's one of the products that's included in one of my companies, and it measures the electrical activity of the heart. But you can actually measure your electrical activity with outside. You have like a range around you where you can measure that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually measure, depending on your heart rate variability, you can determine if you're experiencing stress. And generally, when you have mental stress, that begins to affect you physically, and you begin to experience physical problems because of that mental stress. And that's been proven scientifically. There are a lot of studies about mental stress, and mental stress is caused by your thoughts, what you think, what you put in your mind. And I know it's hard because we live in an imperfect world. We live in a world where there are people that, you know, are rude, they have no ethics. You know, you may be married to an abuser, and so that causes stress. So you have to get out of that situation, get into a safe place. And when you're not in that situation, start reprogramming your mind and write down the things that you're thankful for. There's always something to be thankful for. So I keep repeating that because it does work, and you have to reprogram your mind, and only you can do that. And when people start being negative about your situation, and I know that happens because it happened to me, you know, people would say, well, why did you keep going back? Why did you have so many children? And, you know, it is hard to understand. I've heard people say, I can't believe she's in an abusive situation and she went back. Can you believe that? She's crazy. And they don't understand the dynamics that cycle, because I was in that cycle, and I can be compassionate about that. But it is so important, when you're in an abusive situation and someone's negative towards you, like maybe you deserved it, or, well, it's your fault because you're in it. Stay away from those people and find people that are going to support you, people that are going to pour life into you. They're going to love you, and they're going to support you. And there's a difference between, you know, constructive criticism and just outright meanness. Or sometimes people say
Yeah,
things and they don't really understand what they're saying, but
absolutely.
that affects you. So you need to constantly work on reprogramming yourself. And when these thoughts come up of your past, just focus on where you are today and where you want to be, and change that picture in your mind, and that'll make a huge difference in your life.
That's great, great, great advice. And you know, Sakoni Prince, he's in the comment room, and he's just praising you for telling your story. He says your story is amazing, your strength is unmatched, and to keep telling your story. Absolutely, absolutely. I second that emotion, Sakoni. And I thank you for telling your story, and I thank you for making that last point, that like with everything, whether it is trying to reach a goal, whether it is trying to overcome another obstacle, whether it's trying to get out of an abusive situation, it all begins in the mind. It all begins here. If
Mhm.
you can see it in your mind, then you can push it out into the universe, and you can manifest that which you see in your mind. If all you see in your mind is abuse, then all that's going to manifest in your life is more abuse. But if you see something different, and sometimes you got to get away from something in order to see something different. So, by all means, we're not saying that it's something that happens overnight or it's something that's easy to do. But if you can surround yourself with supportive people, if you can get yourself in a situation where you can get out of the abuse and get yourself to a place of calm where you can reprogram your mind with positive thoughts, with the great things that are in your life, when you can start focusing in on them, then that gives you less opportunity and less time to focus on the abuse that you
Mhm.
went through, which gives you less time to finding yourself back in the abuse once again.
Mhm.
And then you can find your breakthrough, which just happens to be one of your new books that's going to be
Yes.
coming out, right, Marie?
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited about this book, Breakthrough, because it gives you practical tools on how to break through. So it's, um, my chapter is a how to chapter, and it is co-authored with Les Brown, with Halek, the cosmonaut, who's the author of the 5 Day Weekend, that best-selling book, and Johnny Wimry. So I'm really excited about this book that will be out in December.
Absolutely. It looks like it's going to be a great, great book talking about the breakthrough and for what you went through, and thank you for sharing that information with us. You know, I'm so glad that you were able to have a breakthrough for yourself, a breakthrough for your children, and a breakthrough for the rest of your life, because in many cases, in the cycle of abuse, people don't have the opportunity to continue to live a life. But I'm glad that God wasn't through with you and God had more to share with the world through you, that he was able to bring you through that cycle of abuse into your breakthrough. So now that you can encourage, support, and help other people to find their breakthrough. So, Marie, when is this book going to be coming out?
It'll come out it's expected to come out the first week of December.
And for right now, how can they get more information or get on your mailing list so that they'll know when that book is ready and waiting?
So you can go to my website, mariecosgrove.com. You can follow me on Facebook. I will definitely be posting updates on there. Marie Cosgrove on Facebook. And you can follow me on Instagram, and I will be posting updates as the dates get closer.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. And don't while you're waiting on that book, don't sleep. You can always get another copy of her book where she co-authored with us the book You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose, and you can get the intimate details of her wellspring of life story, as well as her story of going from homelessness to CEO, all within the pages of You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose. You can also get more information on her website, mariecosgrove.com, or you can go to unstoppablecoaching.com and you can go to the store section and you can purchase a copy of the book there. So I know you can't wait to get this book Breakthrough that's coming out in December, but you can take a little bit of Marie home with you right now by getting your copy of the book You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose. So I just want to say, let's look at some comments before we let you go. Of course, I got to put this comment up there. Hi, Marie, you are a gem.
I love you, Sharon. Thank you.
Robert Lyons said, absolutely powerful and true. Thank you. Arlene Collins says she is a survivor of abuse. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Wow, Arlene. Thank you.
Sharing with us, Arlene. Arlene was with us that weekend with the Black Belt Speaker Camp.
Yes.
So I don't know if you got a chance to meet her while you were there, but she is an overcomer. She's not just a survivor. She is an overcomer, and she is on her way to living an unstoppable journey as well. So she says she is so inspired by your story, and congratulations. So you are definitely making a difference in the lives of people that you share your story to. So I congratulate you for taking the time and making the decision now to share your story. There's so many great things about you. There's so many things that you are known for, but now you're taking on this new challenge of inspiring people with your story so that they know that if you can make it through and be the powerful person that you are today, then maybe, just maybe, they can do it too. So I thank you so much. And I thank you for coming on the show again, Marie.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And yes, absolutely, everyone can do it. It is absolutely possible to get out of that situation. So thank you, Terrence, for having me. I appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm gonna send you back down to the green room. Save some of the food. Brother's hungry. If the dog can eat, can the host eat? Please, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so don't disconnect, and put your information on how they can get in contact with you, your Instagram, your Facebook, and your website in the comment section. And again, Marie, you're always welcome here on the Unstoppable Story Show. When the book drops back in December, give us a call and we'll definitely get you on to promote the book then as well. Okay.
Thank you, Terrence.
All right, you guys. Marie Cosgrove. Look out for that new book coming out in December, Breakthrough. It is another collaborative book that is going to be featuring the great Les Brown, Johnny Wembley, Halleck, the cosmonaut. It's just going to be a great book, and she's going to be talking to you, giving you key points, giving you key information on how you can move towards your breakthrough as well. So we appreciate Marie for taking the time to be our guest on the Unstoppable Story Show. For you guys, that is a wrap. Again, you can get your copy of the book You Are Unstoppable by going to unstoppablecoaching.com/store, and you'll see the book right there, and you get more information about her great chapters in the book, along with some of our other fabulous authors who were part of this book, You Are Unstoppable, Moving from Past to Purpose. And we also have a story in there from one of our authors that talk about cancer. So we touched the whole gamut of cancer awareness and domestic violence awareness this month. So thank you guys, as always, for joining us. You could have been doing anything else on a Tuesday night, but you decided to invest your time in quality programming, and we love you for that. And we want you to come back each and every Tuesday night and recognize that you don't have to continue in the cycle of abuse. You can make it through, just like Marie made it through. There is life on the other side of abuse. And just always recognize that even when you're in the cycle of abuse, and it may be hard to understand and recognize, but recognize that you may not be going through this for you. You may be going through this for the person that you're going to tell your story to somewhere down the road. And you're going to inspire them to let them know that since you made it through and you weren't stopped and you had the ability to come out on the other side as an overcomer, as a survivor, and as somebody who was willing to tell their story and share their story, that you were able to do that, then you have the ability to show somebody else that they can't be stopped too. Why? Because just like you, they are one of the unstoppables. And I thank you guys for sharing this platform with the Unstoppable Story Show. See you next week. We're going into the month of November, the month of Thanksgiving. I want you to come back. We are going to have some phenomenal guests, beginning with the guests from the Mind Shift Talk radio show. And if you guys who've been following me along my journey, you know I got my start on internet radio before I started doing video. And the show next week is going to be a thankful from the heart to the people who got me started doing what I love to do now, which is bringing phenomenal guests to you each and every week on the Unstoppable Story Show. Thank you, Julio, for joining us. Thank you, Angelina. Thank you for sharing your comments. Thank you, Regina, for joining us. Thank you, Arlene. Amen, amen, and amen. And so let me leave you with this. As always, each and every week, I just want to say to you guys, no matter where you are in the world today, decide not to just make it a great day. Make it an unstoppable day. And we'll talk to you real soon. Have an unstoppable week.